It's 2025, and Venezuela has just held yet another disputed national election. Nicolás Maduro remains in power, entering what he calls a new term. But almost everyone outside the country is calling it rigged. Washington says the vote was manipulated. Several Latin American governments and European nations say the same. But this time, the atmosphere feels different, tense, unstable, and far more dangerous. Back in late 2023, the U.S. briefly loosened oil sanctions to pressure Maduro into allowing freer 2024 elections. When he didn't follow through, the U.S. rolled those sanctions back in April 2024 and later revoked Chevron's operating license. At this point, nearly all the toughest restrictions from the old maximum pressure campaign have quietly returned. Meanwhile, in the Caribbean, the USS Gerald R carrier strike group is already on station. Its destroyers, submarines, surveillance aircraft, and strike fighters aren't weeks away. They're right there, inside operational range. And over the past few months, the U.S. has already conducted roughly 19 precision strikes from air and sea, mostly on suspected smuggling networks, including targets Washington claims are tied to Maduro's inner circle. The signal is unmistakable. If things escalate, the United States is already positioned to move. So we ask a real, immediate question. What happens if the U.S. actually attacks Venezuela? And this isn't fantasy. Every scenario here is built from current deployments, official statements, and real decisions being made right now. Inside Venezuela, the government is behaving like it's in the opening phase of a foreign attack. Air defenses have been activated, coastal radars lit up. Troops are moving toward key bases, ports, and strategic installations. Officials warn publicly that any aggression will be answered. And the smallest spark could ignite everything. A drone shot down, a missile landing near a military site, a strike hitting the wrong convoy, a naval vessel firing in self-defense. Any one of these could force both sides across a line that can't be walked back. Once that line is crossed, Washington faces a choice: back away quietly, or push forward and force a decisive outcome. And if push becomes shove, there are a few realistic paths the conflict could take. The first possibility is a limited strike campaign. This is the smallest version of a conflict, and the only one that has a real chance of staying contained. In this scenario, the U.S. doesn't invade and doesn't try to overthrow Maduro. Instead, it targets a cartel-linked infrastructure, much like previous U.S. strikes on ISIS or cartel networks. That means remote airstrips, jungle outposts, safe houses, and small naval vessels used for trafficking. These would be hit by drones, jets, or cruise missiles. No ground troops, no occupation, just surgical attacks. This isn't speculation. These networks already appear in U.S. indictments, and multiple senior Venezuelan officials have been charged in American courts for narcotics trafficking and money laundering. Washington could argue the strikes fall under counter-narcotics authority. The message would be simple: stop, or the next wave hits harder. But nothing is simple here. Caracas won't just absorb the hit. The Venezuelan Air Force still has a few Su-30s and old F-16s. They'd scramble. Portable Igla missiles could threaten low-flying aircraft or drones. State media would explode with propaganda. And Maduro could retaliate: drone strikes on U.S. ships, cyber attacks, or pressuring neighboring countries with a surge of refugees. A small strike might de-escalate the situation, or it might drag both countries into something far bigger. Scenario 2 is a full-scale air and naval assault. Maybe a U.S. ship gets hit. Maybe a drone strike injures American personnel. Maybe politicians in Washington demand action. Suddenly, the mission shifts from hitting smuggling networks to dismantling Venezuela's military. This version is all air power and sea power, no invasion. Within the first 48 to 72 hours, the U.S. would target Venezuela's most critical military sites: long-range S-300 air defense batteries, fighter jet bases housing Su-30s and older F-16s, key command centers, radar grids, naval missile boats, and major oil export facilities, the financial backbone of the regime. On paper, Venezuela looks heavily armed. In reality, most jets are grounded for lack of spare parts. Pilots barely train. Even the S-300s, dangerous in the opening hours, become much less effective once US jamming systems break their communication links. Venezuela might score a hit on a drone or damage a ship, but the overall outcome is blunt. Within days, its conventional military capacity collapses. And that's when Maduro activates Plan 200, his real defense strategy. The plan is to go guerrilla immediately, sabotage roads and bridges, attack power stations, use the cities as cover, and turn every district into a maze of militias and informants. No open battlefields, no front lines, just attrition, chaos, and time. The US doesn't even need to send troops for the conflict to get messy. Bombing continues. Infrastructure degrades, oil markets panic, thousands flee toward neighboring borders. Maduro increases propaganda, framing himself as the defender of national resistance. The conventional fighting ends quickly, but the political war lingers and grows. The third scenario is the most dangerous. A limited US ground invasion. Imagine the air campaign doesn't stop Venezuelan drones, or oil exports are severely disrupted, or the administration decides it needs physical control of a key region. Instead of storming the capital, the US targets strategic coastal locations, maybe Puerto La Cruz with its oil terminals, Punto Fijo with its massive refineries, or the deep-water ports near Maracaibo. Marines land with armored vehicles, artillery, and amphibious support. They secure port facilities, build a defensive perimeter, and hold specific zones. The goal isn't regime change, it's leverage. And at first, it works. Venezuelan forces can't stop a modern amphibious landing. Many troops surrender immediately. But after sunset, the conflict transforms. Colectivos, government-backed armed groups, show up. Drone attacks intensify. Power lines, substations, and pipelines are sabotaged. Urban districts turn into dense battlefields where militias blend into civilians. What was supposed to be a 2-week pressure campaign begins to resemble a 2-year urban insurgency, with global oil prices spiking and millions of civilians displaced. And the moment boots hit the ground, outside players react. Russia trained Venezuela's air defenses and still has advisors in the country. With the war in Ukraine, Moscow won't send soldiers, but it can provide intelligence, propaganda, and man-portable air defense missiles. China has billions invested in Venezuelan oil, but it won't send troops either. Beijing fights through economic pressure, diplomacy, and cyber operations, never with soldiers. Iran is different. Iran already sent Mahajr 6 drones to Venezuela and can ship more. It can also strike indirectly through proxy groups targeting US bases in Iraq, Syria, or the Red Sea. And then there's Cuba. Cuban intelligence keeps Maduro's inner circle secure. They run surveillance operations and help suppress internal threats. They won't fight openly, but their role behind the scenes is one of the most influential. Guyana likely supports the United States and might even allow some form of military activity from its territory. Colombia quietly cooperates. Brazil calls for de-escalation while preparing its borders for refugees. So who wins? Militarily, the United States wins every time. Its carriers, drones, submarines, sensors, and cyber tools overwhelm Venezuela's forces in days. But Maduro isn't trying to win outright. His entire playbook is survival through chaos, drag the conflict out, turn the country into a maze, create pressure, and make the political cost so high the US eventually pulls back. And that's the real danger. Attacking Venezuela is easy, finishing the conflict is not. If you want to see what happens when China and Russia invade the United States, tap the video on your screen now. Thanks for watching.